So Thymesia released a few weeks ago, almost about a month ago, to great positive reviews. And if you haven't seen it, I also made a review of this game, and I actually consider this game to be one of the best Souls-like game on the market right now. And the fact that this game was made by an indie development studio with only 7 developers, they really did a fantastic job with this game. If you want to see my review, the link is in the description and the pinned comment. Now, what I did not do in my review was to talk about the bosses, or at least go into detail about the bosses. That is because I didn't really want to spoil the bosses for anyone that might be interested in trying out this game. However, in this video, I will be talking about just the bosses, and I will be ranking them from best to worst, based on my own personal experience, how much trouble I had with each of the bosses, and more or less what I learned by defeating the boss. So I'm just gonna jump right into this. So let's begin. So the first actual boss you will come across is Gambit from X-Men. Oh wait, hold on, whoops. His name is Odur. Yes, Odur. That's his name. And he is the first boss within the first level called the Sea of Trees. Now I actually struggled quite a bit on this boss because he hits pretty fast and he's very agile. You'll see him teleport around the room or even teleport next to you and hit you with some pretty hard hitting combos, especially if you don't parry or avoid them. Now, since this was the first proper boss, I was very inexperienced with parrying in this game, so because of that I struggled quite a bit. I can't even recall how many times I died to this boss, but one thing I did really like about him is that he really incentivizes you to learn how to parry by memorizing his attack patterns. And I can say that thanks to this boss, I was able to do exactly that. I was able to practice my parries and my parry timings, and eventually I was able to defeat him. And once I defeated him, I can say that my gameplay throughout the rest of the game was just so much better, because I was able to tackle harder enemies like some of the mini bosses, like for example the guy with the greatsword or the Harley Quinn chick, without taking any damage whatsoever, because I was able to parry every single one of their attacks in quick succession. But the thing is with this boss, even if you learned how to parry, he still has a few delayed attacks that will punish people that spam, dodge, or parries, which is literally what I was doing in the beginning, and I had to learn it the hard way. One thing I did notice for Odur is that if you stay close to him and you're very aggressive in the first phase, he's actually very easy to manage. If he manages to get far away from you, he'll then start throwing his cards at you, which can be parried, which I absolutely love. It's really badass. However, the best strategy that I found was to stay close to him and just be aggressive as possible. And because of all that, I'm going to put this boss on the A tier. I wouldn't say he's super amazing, and he is quite frustrating with some of his attacks, especially given the fact that pretty much every enemy in this game, and boss of course, can track you really hard. Even if you're behind them, they can do a full 180 just to hit you. And it's very difficult to dodge enemies in this game. And that is why this game puts a lot of emphasis on parries. But regardless, either way, he is still a great boss and I really enjoyed fighting him. The next boss is the God of the Fools. This guy has an entire submission dedicated to just the boss fight itself because of how unique it is. So first of all, his intro and the overall level, the aesthetics, the level design and everything is just incredible. Just the way he wakes up is just really badass. You can just see that, yeah, this guy is a boss. Now, this boss is not your typical enemy, where you have to dodge or parry his attacks, and then when you have an opening, you go on the offensive. This boss is much more different than that. It actually took me a long time to figure out how to do this boss, because at first I tried hitting his arm, but it did no damage whatsoever. So basically I figured out that this boss is a platforming and puzzle boss. The goal of this boss is to traverse the entire arena while avoiding or killing enemies, avoiding hazards all over the place, like poisonous clouds, and also avoiding the boss and his attacks. The goal is to basically climb higher in the arena until you get to the very top, which is where you basically one-shot the boss. Now I know what some of you might be thinking, and yes, this boss has a lot of similarities to the dragon boss from Dark Souls 3. I can't remember the name of that boss, but anyways, it's exactly the same, where you basically traverse the entire arena until you get to the very top of the dragon and you basically go for the killing blow. And I have to say that I really like the concept of these sort of unique mechanics for boss fights, where instead of each boss being a hack and slash boss, you're basically traversing an arena trying to find its weak point, and the main obstacle in that arena are the enemies and the enemy placements and not the boss himself, so to speak, if that makes sense. And so because of that, I'm gonna actually put this boss on the B tier. And the reason why I didn't put it any higher is because I honestly thought when I first defeated him that there was gonna be a phase 2 with this boss where you fight it on the ground, but that never happened. I honestly would have loved seeing the boss sort of destroy the arena as he's falling down and basically taking you with him to the ground level. And this is where you and the boss sort of have a one-on-one fight. And since this enemy doesn't have legs, he'd be crawling everywhere and attacking you with his massive sweeping attacks. That would have been an incredible phase 2 for this fight. And so because of that potential never really reaching its limits, I'm gonna have to give this boss a B tier. But regardless, this boss is a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed it. Then we get up to the third boss of the game, Mutated Odur. So this is the same guy as before, but now he's got brand new attacks and new mechanics that you have to deal with. And straight up, as much as this fight frustrated me initially because of how many times he attacks you with his tentacles, I still ended up really enjoying this fight. And that is because all of the skills that I learned from fighting Odur, especially learning how to parry, I was able to deal with this boss surprisingly well, although of course I did struggle in the beginning. Now in this fight, he doesn't have a lot of variety with his attacks, but I felt that the fight basically allows you to use your full toolkit. So things like parrying his tentacle attacks, dodging his sword attack, and then interrupting his ranged attack. Honestly, this fight is a very well-rounded fight, and I actually really enjoyed it. It feels amazing doing like this flawless parry on his 4 to 5 combo attack that he hits you with his tentacles on his back. It just feels amazing to do. And in turn, it also damages him back, because that's the beauty of parry in this game. And in addition to all of that, something that is very common with other bosses, his attack patterns are very exaggerated and therefore easily recognizable. So it shouldn't take too long for someone to learn his attack patterns and then figure out when to parry and how many times you should parry his combo attacks. So I'm straight up gonna put this boss on the S tier. That is because I really appreciate how well rounded this boss fight is and how this boss allows you to use your full defensive and offensive toolkit. Overall, a fantastic fight. The next boss on the list is the Hanged Queen, this massive undead bat. My first impression was that I've seen a boss that is very similar to this in Jedi Fallen Order, but one thing that I actually like about this boss is that every single one of its attacks are parryable. Even the ones where he jumps in the air and smashes the ground, and a few other attacks where he claws the ground and then scratches backwards, all of his attacks are parryable. And that is something that I kind of learned on the go, because I managed to defeat this boss on my very first playthrough completely blind because of two reasons. One is because all of his attacks are exaggerated and therefore are parryable, and secondly, I was using the Greatsword Plague Weapon, which has a guaranteed stagger or a knockdown, but I wasn't sure if it was going to work on this boss, so I gave it a shot, and lo and behold, it literally has a guaranteed stagger on the boss, which is incredible because occasionally this boss does this massive shout attack, or no, it's not even attack, it's more of a channeled ability where he starts healing his health, and in that moment you're supposed to out damage his healing. But what I instead decided to do was to attack him with my greatsword, and it straight up just interrupts his healing. And so I kept using that to interrupt or stagger the boss, go in for the attack, parry him a few times if he goes for the attacks, and just rinse and repeat. And on my very first playthrough, completely blind, I managed to defeat this boss on my first try. And because of that, I'm going to put this boss on the B tier. The reason why I didn't put him any higher was I kind of expected him to be a little bit more difficult. Maybe if he wasn't as easily staggered, that would have been good. Or I don't know, maybe if he used a bit more variety in his attacks. If you're far away, occasionally he might charge at you. But to be honest, I think he only did that once in my playthrough. and I just managed to interrupt him or stagger him with the greatsword. So overall, I actually really did enjoy this fight, but I kind of was expecting a little bit more, so that is why I'm going to put him on the B tier. The next boss that I'm going to be talking about is the Sound of the Abyss, which it sounds pretty awesome, but the boss himself is the worst boss in the game. And the reason for that is most of the time you will literally just be standing there waiting for things to happen, instead of actually actively engaging the boss fight in any meaningful way. So the main mechanics of this fight is that this rock sort of worm will spawn crystals from the top, and they will sort of smash down on the ground, and you'll have this entire arena sort of covered with these crystals. Occasionally, as you're running around, you'll see this massive red AoE on you, and you're supposed to dodge out of it, which will then explode, causing a lot of damage if you're still inside that red AoE. And then occasionally what he'll do is that he will basically start from the right hand side or left hand side of the arena, or that sort of massive platform that you're standing on, and basically eat through or consume basically anything that's in his way. And there's only this one little nook that you can stand in to avoid his sort of charged attack, and once he reaches the end, or once his body covers that entire platform, you basically go up to its neck and hit him a few times, and that's literally what it is. It's just rinse and repeat. Eventually, once you've damaged his health and you've taken down his wound bar as well, or his wound health bar, you basically just end the boss and that's it. But there is no doubt that literally most of the fight is literally just waiting for the boss to actually come down to your platform so you can actually damage the damn thing. And because of that, I'm actually going to put this boss on the E tier. I wouldn't say it's that bad to deserve an F tier, because an F tier is literally a full fail. But yeah, I would say that this boss is pretty close to an F tier. And that is why I really did not enjoy this fight at all. Now we move on to what I would consider to be one of the best bosses in really any sort of Souls or Souls-like game. And his name is Varg, a badass knight carrying a massive greatsword. What I love about this boss is that his intro is very minimalistic and really badass. He doesn't usher a single word, yet you can see how intimidating he is. And just from a design standpoint, I really like sort of the look of this boss. He is not over the top, yet still looks like a boss should, if that makes sense. And I'm just gonna say it straight away. I think Varg is possibly one of the best introduction bosses I have ever fought, period. The only other intro boss that I would say is on even footing is Gundyr from Dark Souls 3. And the reason for that is both of them have plenty of things in common. So first of all, both of them are the first bosses that you encounter in their respective games. And both of them also show up later in their respective games. And they are a bit harder, have a similar moveset with some new abilities, and just are generally more fun to fight. Secondly, both of these bosses are purely based in melee combat. They don't use magic or any other tricks, just their massive weapons. Now in the case of Varg, this is actually a fight you are meant to lose the very first time you come across him in the tutorial section. However, you can actually take down his first health bar if you're really good at it, and it will actually award you with an achievement or a trophy. However, it will put you in the same cinematic as if you lost the fight against him. So either way, the very first time you come across him, it's, you're gonna lose anyway. Then you actually come across him a second time quite a bit later on in the game. And this is where the fight is just so much more fun. The music, the arena, just the actual fight itself is just so good. And the reason why I consider Varg to be, honestly, one of the best introduction bosses in any Souls game is because of his mechanics. All of his attacks can be parried or dodged, except for one, which is an unblockable attack by design. And that attack, you're supposed to dodge or get out of range. The thing that I like about Varg, and again, pretty much every other boss, is that his attacks are very well choreographed. Possibly the most well choreographed fight in the game compared to any other boss. And this results in his movesets being, again, very exaggerated, which is very similar to Gundyr, as I've said before, from Dark Souls 3. The benefit of these sort of melee fights is that it actually makes them very easy to track their attacks and allows you to parry him purely based off of instinct or reaction time. You don't need to have a very specific attack that you can parry or dodge. That's not how it is with Varg. This guy is a straight up tank and spank, or just a straight up brawl with this guy. It's one of the most fun fights I've ever had in a very long time. This is something that is very difficult to achieve from a gameplay perspective, yet these developers were able to achieve this extremely well with Varg. And because of how fun this boss fight is, especially the second time you fight him, he is easily an S tier boss in my opinion. I genuinely enjoy this fight, and I actually went back and fought him again and again because of how fun he is. And so therefore he definitely deserves the S tier spot. Now let's move on to the second last boss fight in the game, Urd. This is the same person that shows up right at the beginning, but she actually walks away while you fight Varg. I have to say that I actually really enjoy this boss fight. There's not a lot of variety in her attacks, but one thing I did really like is that she does this sort of hopping thing where she hops from left to right and then she goes in for an attack, and sometimes she might hop once or sometimes she'll hop twice. And so you don't really know when she's going to hit you, so you have the sort of 50-50 chance that she might hit you after the first jump or after the second one. So you kind of always have to be on guard. Outside of that, she really only has two main combos. One is sort of like that forward slash followed by a couple stabs, and the other attack is just a few stabs in quick succession. And again, all of her attacks can be parried. Occasionally she'll just run away from you or just back up away from you and then throw her sword at you, and if you parry that, it will drop the sword in your location, and eventually when she charges enough energy, I don't really know when that happens or how it happens, but she'll summon this massive sort of AoE around all of these swords and in the middle, and this is an unblockable attack, so you are literally meant to get out of it as quickly as possible. Outside of that, it's mostly a rinse and repeat, but overall I actually did enjoy this fight. So because of that, I'm gonna put Urd on the A tier, but because she sounds something straight out of an anime and it just hurts my ears, I'm actually gonna put her in the F tier because she's from an anime, that's it. I mean, too bad, just how it is. So yeah, she's gonna be in an F tier, but technically she's in the A tier, so that's just the way it is. Finally, we come to the last boss of the game, and arguably one of the best boss fights that I've actually really ever fought. And this boss is basically you, or basically the main character, Corvus. This boss has all of the normal combos and plague weapons that you do. So in order to defeat this boss, not only do you have to memorize quite a lot of the movesets of different plague weapons, but also just the actual AI of the boss himself. He's not really that easy, but at the same time, he's not super difficult either. This is the fight where I would say I died the most. Maybe I think I died to the Mutated Odur the most, and maybe this guy comes in second place. But honestly, I really enjoy this fight. The music, the arena, the actual movesets of this boss is just incredible. And this guy, this boss, is literally the culmination of all of your skills and knowledge that you have gained by playing the game and defeating all the enemies in the past. This guy will test all of that. But out of everything else, he will test your parry system to its very limits. There's one attack that he does where he hits you with his claws, and I actually managed to find a very good way of memorizing how to parry that specific attack, because initially I was getting hit by it and I was having a tough time trying to dodge or parry that attack. And so the way that it works is that once he takes out his claws, it's obvious enough for you to know, okay, this attack is incoming. So it's not really worth you trying to dodge, even though you can dodge, but he really stays close to you for most of the fight, so it's not really that easy to dodge. And so the way that he does it is that the first time he'll hit you like once, then the next attack will be 2 times, the next attack will be, let's say, 3 times, and the final one will be 2 times. So if you just remember that combination in your head, and remember that little spacing in between each of those combinations, you will be able to flawlessly block this guy, and in turn, do a lot of damage back to him because you've parried all of his attacks. But overall, there's no doubt in my mind that this guy is definitely an S tier boss. I would say that this guy is possibly my most favorite boss in the game, with Varg being a very close second in terms of just how fun these fights are and just how much I enjoyed them. But anyways, that is the tier list of what I consider to be the best bosses all the way down to the worst bosses. Do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, I will see you in the next video.